Pawan Kumar sir.
Hello. Yes. 1 second. I think I have some issue with my webcam.
Maybe that's not an issue, sir. Your voice is audible, sir. We'll proceed, sir. We'll start the proceedings in 2 minutes, sir.
Okay. So I will share my screen, right? Okay.
Just a minute, sir. We'll just try to introduce you, then we can. Yes. Ramu, sir, can we proceed?
Sure, sir.
Please.
A warm welcome to all the participants. Second session on 25th February 2020. Faculty Development Program sponsored by Atal Academy on recent advancements in artificial intelligence and robotics. Today we have a wonderful person, an expert, Dr. Pawan Kumar Garu from IIIT Hyderabad campus. We all heartily welcome you, sir, to this session, to this Atal FTP program. On behalf of the organizing team, I take privilege to introduce the resource person of our today's session, Dr. Pawan Kumar Garu. Dr. Pawan Kumar is a graduate from IIT Guwahati campus. He did his PhD from INRIA, France, which is worldwide famous from 1967. Before joining in IIIT Hyderabad, he also did his 2 postdocs, one from FU Berlin, Germany, and another from KU Leuven from Belgium. Dr. Pawan Kumar is very passionate in his research domains like numerical algorithms, high performance computing, computer vision, machine learning, and deep learning. Dr. Pawan Kumar, sir, we all heartily welcome you for your session. Over to you, sir.
Sir, voice is not coming. Hello?
Sir, Pawan Kumar, sir. Hello.
Sir, your voice is audible, sir, now. Pawan Kumar, sir, please go ahead.
Hello, can you see the screen?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
The screen
Okay,
is
good.
visible.
Okay,
and
okay, I'm
audible.
sorry.
Please go ahead, sir.
Okay then. So I kept a very generic title of supervised learning, but I feel that before going to deep learning, I will just quickly go through supervised learning basic ideas and fundamentals. Okay, so this is the slide I also gave elsewhere. So it's not very, I mean, it's a very recent one only. So first thing is let us look into supervised learning. Okay, so supervised learning is where we are given some level data. Okay, so where the data is level. Okay, so for an input, the level is given. Okay, so for instance, if a cat image is there, then there is a label given to me that okay, this for this image there is a cat there. Okay, so these type of problems are called supervised learning, or in other words, machine learning under guidance. So there are other types, for instance, unsupervised learning. So in unsupervised learning, here you have a concept of a teacher where you is supervising the person and telling him that, okay, what you're doing is correct or what you're doing is not correct and so on. So there is a supervision going on here, but there could be a problem where like there is no supervision and then the person is like learning things on its own. Okay, so it's like under no guidance. So what we will be talking about is supervised learning today. Okay, so yeah, so I can just define supervised learning is a method in which we teach the machine using level data. Unsupervised learning machine is trained on unlabeled data without any guidance. So this is a very broad way to define it. Okay, so some of the supervised learning learning algorithms could be like regression. Okay, so it's when we want to predict a continuous quantity, right? So for instance, I have some data like this, and then I want to fit a curve, continuous curve through this. Okay, so that's a regression problem. Okay, so the examples could be, for instance, so I believe that the slide is a little bit magnified. Okay, so now this is okay. Yeah, so for instance, person's weight is a continuous quantity. Okay, so because someone can be 65.2 kilo, someone can be 65.3 kilo, and so on. So it's kind of a continuous quantity. It could be anything like greater than 0, and it could be like high. Okay, so and it can take continuous values, and then housing prices could be a continuous quantity, and so on. So these are the examples of regression problem. Whereas the classification problem is when we want to predict. I mean, the outcomes are like finite or so. For instance, whether it's a cat or not. Okay, so there's like a discrete problem. Okay, so either is something there or not there, or it could be a digit classification problem. So where we can say, okay, the image is 1, or that this image corresponds to 2, or so on. So in this case, the number of classes will be 10, starting from 0 to 9. So here we see in particular in supervised learning. So this is supervised learning. In supervised learning, now we have like different types, like regression, and then we have a classification problem. Okay, so regression is more about fitting a curve through a data, and then classification is when we want to say, okay, the email is a spam or not, and so on. Image is a cat or not, or handwritten digits represents which digits, and so on. So again, for instance, here we have for instance, in the case of unsupervised learning, then we may have classifications of the different types, like associations, describing pattern in data, and then, for example, clustering and anomaly detections, and so on. So these are examples of unsupervised. I'm not going into unsupervised. So I will dive into, I don't know why it's zoomed out. It should not zoom like that. 1 second. There is some issue with the zoom here. View. Okay, let me work with this level of zoom. Otherwise, it goes out of, yeah. So in supervised learning, if we go into linear regression, right? So linear regression, again, it's about finding a function that fits through the data. For instance, I can talk about a function like this. So I have data's xi datas here, and then we have the corresponding yi values here. And I started with a model which is a linear. In my case, it's like a line. So it's the equation of a line. So these are the intercepts, and then these are the slope. Beta is the slope. So this is like a line y is equal to mx plus c. And then what I'm saying is like we have points x1, x2, x3, x4, and so on. These are my data, and then the output data I observe from experiments are like this. Then what I'm saying is like, okay, maybe it's like a line. So let me start with a linear model and try to see if it fits there. So to do that, my model would require mx1 plus c should be y1, mx2 plus c should be y2, and so on, right? So this is how. That's what I mean by line going through this. It means that it should be this point should satisfy the equation of the line. So if I do that, then I can get a systems of equations where these beta 1, beta n, p are the slopes, okay, and then this is the data we have, input sample, and this is the output that I'm expecting. So this is the linear model we have, and then we have to solve for beta here, right? So we have to solve for beta and z here. Okay, so this is one model. So one example could be, for instance, so in this case, we have the states and the GDP, population, and unemployment rate. So this is the data we have. And if we again go by the model that we have, y is equal to x times b. So here x is a matrix now. So basically, we need to minimize this now. We need to minimize this. So the problem is about minimizing the experimental data that we observe, and this is the model that we have, and we have to solve this minimization problem. Okay, so this is the type of line fitting that I am expecting. So these are my x1, x2, and so on, and these were my y1, y2, and so on. I started with a line, and then this after solving that equation, I can plot this line and say that okay, this is the best fit across the data that I have. Okay, and then similarly, we can talk about logistic regression. So this is for classification problem. So in logistic regression, it's a slightly different approach that we assume. So in logistic, we are trying to classify a sample. Okay, so to classify a sample, what we want to do is to find a function that can tell me that beyond this it's one class, and beyond this it's some other class. Okay, so basically I will see the output of this. This is my prediction function. So I will see an output of this. If it is like 0.9, then I said, okay, this is like, I will classify it as a cat. And if this is like something close to 0.2 or something, okay, these values, then I will say, okay, this is, so this is the threshold value we have, right? So an image is there, and then I can say, okay, my prediction function, if it gives the score of, let us say 0.9, then I will say, okay, this is a cat. And if my prediction function gives a score of 0.2, which will be on this point of the on this part of the curve, then I will say, okay, it's not a cat, basically. So we can we have built a prediction function that tends to push the images that are cats around this region, and then those which are not around this region. Okay, so that's intuitively I'm trying to tell you. So overall, this is the logistic the prediction function we have, and then we can again define a loss function in this case, and then try to learn that. So in this case, the loss function could be defined like this. Okay, so minus log if the class classifies as 1, and then if it's minus log of 1 minus this if it's 0. Okay, so these things I'm not going into too much detail, but I'm just telling you that there is a logistic regression where you want to fit a curve. There is a classification problem where you want to have a decision boundary, and then say, okay, beyond this it's one class, beyond that it's another class. So here again we have a loss function here. If you see the linear regression, then the loss function was this. Okay, so this was the loss function where I'm saying that the line is closest to the output that I have, and here the loss function is chosen in this way. I'm not going to detail of why it's chosen this way, but this is a loss function for the logistic regression. Okay, and then I would like to minimize this this loss function, and in this case, the parameters that I have to obtain to make this loss function minimal, okay, so is theta here, okay, so theta is the parameter involved here. This is that's the same theta that is here. So I would like to minimize this loss function with respect to theta. Okay, so there is another supervised learning model, but I'm going to skip this this type supervised learning with SVM. And since the talk is on deep learning models, I will skip to this. I mean, this is a very powerful model as well, SVM. But let me just go through, yeah, to go through the neural network based model. So yes, so neural net. Why are we interested in neural networks, right? So well, it could be used in speech processing. It could be used in language translations. Okay. So basically, neural networks are everywhere. For example, if you want to do image segmentation, okay. So if you want to do image segmentation, so here you have a picture, and then you want to say, okay, which object is a bag, which object is a bicycle, which object is a building, and so on. So in these cases, again, neural networks are used these days. Essentially, CNN is used. For instance, here I have a picture where I'm trying to identify the model of a car. Okay, all these things could be automated. Here we see that the neural network could be used to play games, and in fact, not just play games, it can beat the best of the players. So this is the player, Go player. And it's the neural network based software can beat the existing Go player. Okay, so and the name of this software is AlphaGo. Okay, so this is indeed quite exciting. So another application of neural network could be in image captioning. So for example, the image is there, and then you have to predict what the person is doing. Okay, for instance, here in this case, a boy is doing a backflip on a wakeboard. Okay, so it is indeed correct, right? So it identifies that the boy is there and it's doing some kind of a backflip, and then there is a wakeboard here. Okay, so you can see, so for example, man in black shirt is playing a guitar. So just someone gives you an image, and from there, can you predict what is the action going on here? So in this case, the man in black shirt is playing guitar, right? So similarly, you can see here a girl in pink dress is jumping in air. Okay. So I hope my voice is clear, right? So I hope all of you can hear me and everything is going fine. Okay. If not, then please let me know. Okay, so for instance, if you see image like this, then here you have to predict what the action is. So in this case, it predicts very well. Okay, so you can see that these are difficult tasks, but it's able to predict. So let me introduce you to neural networks. Well, the first thing for neural network is to the main interest that comes in this would be, I would say, let us say, starting from perception. Okay, so perception problems are the most low-hanging fruits, I would say. So for instance, perception, what does perception mean? So what are the way we perceive things, like, so how the way we see things, okay, so the way we hear things, okay, so so all this are part of perception. So there are other things like it could be touch, sense, basically things that we can sense as well, right? So touch and smell and so on. But okay, so if we just look into this, can we make the computer see? Can we make the computer hear? And make sense of things and so on. So so the main thing is like how as a human being we can perceive things. So and these things are needed. For example, given a voice signal, how can I do a transcription of that? Given an image, how can I make a text caption? Given a game state, how can I do a next move and so on? So all this places neural networks are used. Okay, so let us start with the thinker himself. So the human beings are called thinkers, and for some reason, because we can think better than the other species. So that's Augustine Rodin. He and this is sculpture of the thinker. So magical capacities of human. So what are the magical capacities of humans? Well, we can learn, we can solve problem, we can recognize pattern, we can create. Okay, so and well, right now, how do humans think? So that's the natural question in our mind. Like, how do humans think, right? So well, it's a work in progress. We don't really know in detail how humans think. So how the mind works, right? This is already an unsolved mystery. Okay, but we can start with some basic theories of cognitions, right? So let us try to develop a few things. For example, lightning is followed by thunder. Okay, so this is something. This is an association we know, right? So okay, lightning is followed by thunder. Whenever I see lightning, I see that something, some thunder also follows from that. So that's the association we make. So for example, we saw a bolt of lightning, and now we are going to hear a thunder, and then we saw. So we just heard thunder. So let us say I heard thunder, then I expect that some lightning happened before that. Okay, so there are associations that we can make from our natural day-to-day life, and so one of the theories that we associate, hence we learn. So one of the theories goes like this. So if we associate things, then we learn about those things. So for example, lightning, we learn along with thunder. Okay, so pair of thoughts can be associated. So that's one way to think how. I mean, that's we are trying to say like how we develop thinking basically. So the Aristotle developed 4 laws of association. So law of continuity, law of frequency, law of similarity, and law of contrast. So law of continuity says that the things or events that occur close together in space of time get linked together. For example, in the case of lightning and thunder, they occur together, so hence they get linked together. And then there is a law of frequency. So for example, the more often the two things or events are linked, the more powerful that association. So you can remember that if you keep reading something repeatedly, then you tend to memorize that much well. So for example, in history topics in high school, we may have seen that we may have to memorize a lot of things. And at least in my case, I had to repeat things a lot so that I can put in my memory. Okay, so there are things like you repeat and then you learn more. So that's law of frequency. Law of similarity is like similar things you tend to relate together. For example, pen and pencil, you may want to relate together. So if you see a pen, then you may relate to pencil as well, and so on. Bread and butter, I mean, they go together. Okay, so it's like they are like they follow law of continuity, bread and butter, because they're kind of together. So with bread, I tend to use butter. Okay, I mean, at least in my case, right? So law of contrast, it's also you tend to associate contrasting things. So it's something that is opposite to another is you tend to recall. Okay, so contrasting things, opposite things, you also relate. Okay, so these were the 4 things proposed by Aristotle on how we associate things, because he thought that when we associate things, then we learn. So the one of the thing is like, where is the association stored, right? So if we do want to associate, but the point is like it still doesn't answer how do we think, right? So and hence Feynman, I mean, if you recall the word of Feynman, that if I don't know how to create, then actually I don't understand. So if I don't know how to create something, basically I don't understand the thing. Okay, so our focus goes from just coming up with the theories of associations, and then telling that how we do that actually, right? So how we actually associate. So I mean, association is a theory of learning, but then we want to know how we do it actually, right? So what is the process? So enter connectionism. So connectionism theory tells us that we think because they looked at the brain and then they thought, okay, there are a lot of connections in between the neurons, and then hence we learn because we connect to many of the neurons and so on. Okay, so at least they are going to the direction that of understanding in more detail. So they looked at the brain as an inspiration, and they think that okay, there is a mass of interconnected neurons, and hence the many neurons connect to each neuron, and hence the information is in the connections. Okay, so that's the thing proposed. So Mind and Body, this is a book one can read, and then hence these were the initial parts of how neural networks were originated. They were essentially getting inspirations from neurons. And so basically the neurons connect to other neurons, and the processing capability of the brain is in the function of these connections. Connectionist machines emulate this structure. So basically, if you want to build a connectionist machine, okay, just like a brain, then you may take an inspiration like from here. You take various compute units are there, and you connect them. And we can make a bold statement that all world's knowledge is stored in connection between these elements. Okay, so that's like very bold, but nevertheless we can make some statement like this. Okay, so let's see. So in a very abstract sense, we can denote the neural networks in our brain as a graph. We have a compute nodes, and then there are connections between them. That's what initially people thought about, that okay, if we have to get closer to the brain, then maybe we will have something like this, where we throw in some connections, and then maybe we will see what to do with these nodes as well. So maybe they are like a small processing units. So neural networks are connectionist machine as opposed to the von Neumann machine. So remember, in computer science, we are taught computer architecture, and in computer architecture, the modern day CPUs, for example, the laptops and the desktops that we use, they have this architecture, the so-called von Neumann architecture, and in this we have processors, which is So and then we have a memory unit, and then we have networks. Especially if we want to connect to various other networks, where let us say Ethernet or InfiniBand or whatever be the case. So we connect different nodes as well via some networks. But essentially, we follow von Neumann architectures. In von Neumann architecture, we have some processing units. So basically, ALU, arithmetic logic units, and then we have those logical operations going on. But then when we run a program, so we compile our code. Let us say we get the output a.out, and then we run the code. We run our command. Then it's sitting in the memory base. It's in the memory. So it's hard disk basically, and then a hard disk it goes to the, let us say, RAM, and from the RAM. Okay. So the program is also there in the hard disk basically. Okay, so the program and all this is there in the hard disk. The C code, whatever we write, Python code, it's all there sitting in the hard disk. So this is a hard disk. Then it's a RAM. We have a cache, and then we have registers, and then we have the actual computations going on. Okay, so this is by disk, RAM, cache. And then registers and so on. Okay, and then the actual computation goes on here. So I run a.out, then it goes to RAM, and then it goes to cache, and then it goes to registers, and then the computer comes, and then it comes back, and then I can fetch the output file and so on. So this is essentially the architecture, von Neumann architecture. It's very different from what we are trying to build. This is a connectionist machine or whatever we call, right? So it's quite different from what we have here. Okay, so. So what do we do? Like, how do we build the processing unit? So some previous theories came. So for instance, they thought about two types of machines. For example, A-type machine or B-type machines. Okay, we don't have to get too much into this. I will get into perceptron basically, but these were the initial ideas of how people were thinking about this. So you may build a network of NAND gates, or you may have like other type of machines. So we may classify them into two types. So one is NAND gates. So NAND gates are the usual modern day things that we see, right? So we have it could be built with NAND gates. So NAND is a functionally complete operator. Okay, so functionally complete. So basically, any logical unit can be formed using, and logical operation can be formed using NAND gates. And then we can focus on some other types. So it's a B type, which is more closer to what we want to see as a connectionist machine. So a connection between units has a modifier, and then there is a signal that sails through. And if the red light is on, the output is fixed to 1. So basically, we can think of a network where the signal comes through. So we are trying to emulate like our brain. So we are thinking of those kind of models. So something enters, and then there may be some modifier, so to say. So there is a green and red one, and we can say, okay, we can have some threshold here, and I say, okay, it's incoming signal. Can I pass it through? So the modifier will tell us, okay, yes, then it passes through. Otherwise, it stops. So it's a very basic model that we can think of. And remember, we don't know exactly how neurons work in more detail. I mean, things are still in progress, but we are trying to just get closer. So this is the example of a neuron with so-called dendrites and soma, and then axons and so on. And signal comes in through the dendrites, we believe, and then it goes into the soma, and signal goes out via axons. This is the axon, and then goes out to another neuron. So there could be another neuron here, and then the signal can go out again, and so on. So there are only one axon per neuron, and so on. What is interesting is the neurons don't undergo cell division. So that's a very important thing to understand. Okay. Okay, so now we come to the idea, a basic idea of the modern day neural network, and the basic idea is the idea of a perceptron. So this is the model that was proposed, where we say that some input comes in, and you can think of these things like a neuron. So something comes in, and then activation, deactivation happens here. So in this case, we have the inputs x1, x2, x3, x4, and then it passes through the network with some weights, w1, w2, w3, and wn. Here the sigma denotes sum of these weighted sum. Okay, so this sigma denotes here x1 w1 plus x2 w2 plus dot 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 plus xn wn. So we have the weighted sum. So that's what this sum operation means. And then after that we do some kind of thresholding. Remember, if we want to do a classification.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
What may be the difference between this perceptron and neuron, sir? So I'm writing right now mathematical model of neuron.
Yeah,
But
look,
where-
neuron even I don't claim to know about a neuron. So neuron, what we have in picture in mind is this from the
that's good, sir.
from the
Here you have
neurologist.
written, that's
Yes.
good. Here you are written mathematical model of
Yeah.
perceptron. Then I got what the difference. What it may be? Is it a neuron? Perceptron is nothing but a neuron.
I mean,
or any other meaning. That's my
Look,
that's a little bit clarity.
Yeah, so we may think of perceptrons as a neuron in our case. Remember that we want to build an abstract model of the neuron. Okay, so we can think of this as one basic compute unit, just like we have a one neuron being seen as a basic compute unit. But remember that telling that something is equal to something is not a good idea. Okay, so in our terms, we call them, in a more standard technical term, we call them perceptrons. Okay, and then we will build multi-layer perceptrons, MLP, and MLPs. If we make a deeper number of layers, we will get into deep neural networks and so on. So telling something is equal to neuron from biology is not necessarily, in my opinion, is not necessarily a correct thing to do. A more technical term to use would be perceptrons. So let us say this is the perceptron. Okay, loosely you can say this is a neuron. Okay, but I would prefer to say it's perceptron. Okay, perceptron, because as I said, neuron is a biology term, and that's like it's still under progress. Like what exactly they do. Like what we are saying here is, okay, input comes, weighted sum happens, thresholding happens. We don't know exactly what. At least from my knowledge, I don't know exactly what neurons do in biology. Okay, but we are getting inspirations from here that let us build something which is basic. Okay, then. So perceptron is the place where we will start with, and then build complicated networks from there. So let us say the input comes in, and then I take a weighted sum of the input, and then I do an activation based on some activation function. So how do I do the activation also depends. Okay, so it could be some thresholding based. Okay, so the number of inputs combined linearly, that's what I said, and then threshold logic is applied. So this is the threshold logic, and if the input that comes in exceeds certain threshold, then I will say, okay, maybe it's 1, otherwise it's 0. So basically, 1 might say it's a cat, or the 0 will say it's not a cat. Okay, so this is some kind of thresholding I can build. Okay, so remember this was a summation of xi yi. This is the summation sum. So I equal 1 to n. And then here I will apply activation. So let us say this exceeds certain threshold t, then I will classify it to be 1, and then otherwise it will classify it to be 0. So when this model was proposed, then New York Times came with these statements, very bold statement. The embryo of an electronic computer that expects it will be able to walk, talk, see, write, reproduce itself. That's funny. And be conscious of its existence. So these last two things look very like very bold statements. Okay, these are still open, I would say. Very bold statements, very bold claims, right? But if you see the other ones, right? So if you see the other ones, like talk, see, and write, this is happening now. Okay, this is already happening to some extent. Okay, already happening to some extent. This is not like I'm saying a bold statement. No, this is really happening now. So the Siri and then the Google Voice and what you see, they can perceive your statement. So what you talk, they understand, right? So more or less now. So they can see now. Okay, so the self-driving cars, if you see self-driving cars, they essentially are trained to see obstructions are there or not, where is the lane, how the car should bend ahead, looking at the road and so on. So they are able to write now. Okay, so with GPT-3, if you remember GPT-3, do in Google, YouTube, you will see that in GPT-3, it's now able to write news stories, and yeah, it is helping with some coding as well. So it can generate some code as well. So many things are now possible. I'm not saying like it's completely up to human precision, but it's happening. It's going in that direction basically. Basically, you train very big networks and then things start happening. GPT is very big, the largest neural network you can think of right now. Okay, I mean there could be one more by Google, but what is in the open domain largest is the GPT-3 right now that I know. And then there were other, like for example from Japan, there were the Oklahoma Times. Then they said that the Frankenstein monster designed by Navy that things. Okay, so that they took it a bit negatively. I would say that the Frankenstein means that is something that you create kills the creator itself. So that's like a very negative statement, right? Okay, but they were like very bold statements. Like in some sense they were like all seeing the power of the perceptrons. Okay, now. Initial perceptron learning algorithm were proposed where the weights of the network could get updated. Remember that. What is the deal now, right? What is the deal? The deal is that you have come up with a template function. You can think of this as a template function. Okay, this template, or you can think of this as some kind of prediction function. Okay, so this is my prediction function. Okay, remember our goal is to predict, right? So our goal is to predict on unseen data. Okay, but before predicting, we have to train our network, right? So this is our prediction function, the template that we come in advance, right? This is not something that changes or something like that. So this is something I tell you in advance. Okay, let us say. So for example, if I want to do the line fitting, if you remember, then what do I say? Well, I decide in advance. I want to do a line fit, right? So the line model MX plus C is fixed in advance. You could have chosen AX square plus BX plus C as your model as well. Why not quadratic, right? So what if my data is oscillatory? So I would like to use a nonlinear second order, polynomial, and so that it can bend a little bit and then fit, right? So these are the templates you choose in advance, right? And then once you choose this, then your goal is to find M and C, the line basically that will fit this. Same thing is happening here. So this is also supervised learning. Basically, I need to see a lot of data, and then in this case, the function in this case. Let us say x is the vector where I have x1 to xn, and this goes inside, and then I have to have activation of the linear function, right? So let us say my activation function is g of the sum of xi wi. So what this activation function, it could be sigmoid, right? So 1 divided by 1 plus e to the minus, basically is xi wi. So overall, my prediction function could be like this, right? So it's similar to the logistic that you saw before, right? So so this could be my my overall prediction function, right? And then what is the deal? The deal is to just like here in the line fitting case, you had to learn this M and C as the unknowns in your model, right? So these are the weights of your network, right? So these are the weights. Sorry, green is not visible usually. So weights of your network that you need to learn, right? Same thing is happening here in the perceptrons. In perceptron, these are the weights of your network, W1 to Wn. So these weights you're supposed to learn, right? And how will you learn? Because you have for each x, you know, because it is level, you know the corresponding y, right? So based on this y, I can learn x, because I can, vaguely speaking, I can like subtract y and take some kind of a norm and then try to minimize this, because y is known, x is known. The only thing that is not known is wi. Okay, remember that for logistic we use some logistic loss, not this loss norm, but I'm just telling vaguely that that you need to compare your output with the actual output that you should get. Okay, they should be close together, and for which wi they should be close together is the problem in hand. So that's the training part of the network, right? So you training means optimizing your network. Finding an optimal w weights of your network such that the prediction is good. Okay, so that's like very top level view I gave you, and like what the perceptrons model and what are we expecting from these, right? So basically we have a template, just like the line equations. We have a template, and in this template there are weights of the network which are w1 to wn. We need to minimize the weights by comparing with the levels we have in hand. Okay, the prediction that we get and the actual prediction output should have been there. By looking at the difference, we adjust our weights, and that's how we call that model is learning. Okay, so Then, so these are just the notations, like this is the desired output I get. Let us say this is the output of my prediction function, and this is the actual output. And then we want to like make the difference less and less. So if we look into the basic models of perceptron, they can do logical operations. They can do logical operations. For instance, in this case, it does the AND operation you can think of. So this is NOT operations, and this is the OR operation you can think of. So basically, if you remember the AND operation, right? So AND operation. So let us say I want to do. So let us say I want to do the AND operations, right? So I will do 1 1, okay, 1 0. 0 1 0 0, and then if I do an AND of this, right? So this is like 0 0, right? So this is the AND output that I get. So so does this do that, right? So let us say if I input 1 1, so this is 1 here, this is 1 here, right? So 1 times 1, and then remember we have to do a sum here, right? So plus 1 times 1, right? So 1 times 1, and this is 2. Now the threshold I choose is 2, okay? So this is like greater than or equal to the threshold. So this is greater than or equal to 2. So the output must be 1, right? So this is greater than the threshold. So this is greater than or equal to the threshold T. Hence the output should be 1. So that's the output that I wanted. So 1 1 went in, and then output I got is 1. Similarly, I can check the other cases. So for example, 1 and 0. Let us say I put 1 and 0, right? So 1 times, so these weights are fixed. So 1 times 1 plus 0 times 1. Right? So 0 times 1. So this is 1 overall, and this is less than the threshold T, which was set to be 2 in this case. So hence the output will be output is 0, right? So output is 0. So this is also this also produced this, right? So 1 0, the output became 0. So you can check that this network or the perceptron where the weights has been hand tuned. Okay, so earlier I told you that weights need to be learned in a network here, right? So I told you that the weights need to be learned. That's the general case. But in this case, I have handcrafted things in a way that they can behave like a AND gate or gate NOT gate. I remember that AND NOT, for example, are functionally complete, right? So if I do this, then combining with this, I can generate any logical operations you can ask me to do. Okay. So, but we need to combine basically. Okay. So mimics any Boolean gate, right? Is it? Okay. So then when someone came up with saying, okay, but can you create JOR operations? So basically you cannot create JOR operations with this. Then what is the idea? So well, the thing is like with one perceptron. So the additional thing is with one perceptron, you cannot create a JOR operation. Okay, so that's when the idea of an MLP came. So because basically you need more neurons. You can check that no matter which weights or threshold you choose, you can never emulate the exclusive OR. Okay, so remember JOR is exclusive OR. So you can create OR, but not the exclusive OR. So hence from here, people got the motivation to actually create multi-layer perceptrons. So this was the example by Minsky and Papert. So multi-layer perceptrons. So what was proposed then, looking at the idea of the JOR, is that the individual elements are weak computational elements, and we need to somehow like combine them. Okay. So networked elements are needed. We need more neurons and networks and so on. So basically this could be this works like a JOR operation. So now you see I needed a 3 perceptron. Okay. Loosely speaking, I could have used the word neuron, but I don't want to do that. I want to use the technical term perceptron. So this is 1 perceptron, 2nd perceptron, 3rd perceptron. And again, I have handcrafted the threshold weights of my network. I put 1 1 here. Carefully I have included -1 as threshold, 1 here, 2 here, -1. So with this handcrafted thing, the idea here is that you can check that this is indeed a JOR. So if you do 1 1, then the JOR output should be there. If you do 1 0, then the JOR output should correspond to the JOR output and so on. So this is where the idea of multi-layer perceptron came. Okay, so hence the motivation for multi-layer perceptron. So now we can build over this idea. So the multi-layer perceptron is needed. Now it can compose arbitrarily complicated Boolean function. Excuse me. So it can do NAND or NOR and many other logical operations you can think of. Basically, you have to combine them in a variety of ways. That's what it's telling us. Okay, so this is more other some complicated operation going on here. So we can also change from Boolean to real. So for example, if you see, everything we are taking is a Boolean, and the input also we were taking was a Boolean, right? So we were talking about AND gates, so 1 1 is 1 and so on. So we were restricted to Boolean input, but it doesn't stop us to even input reals. Okay, so we can have real inputs, and we can extend our network so that x1, x2, x10 are real valued. Okay, now looking into a little bit of detail. So for instance, for the activation function, I can choose so-called sigmoid. Okay, so I can choose a remember, for a classification problem, I can still hope to get 1 or 0 answer, let us say, so whether it's a cat or not. But since I'm taking input are real and weights are also now real, so the outputs that I may get are like 0.9, and this function should tell me like, okay, it should correspond to 1, or if I get 0.2, then it should correspond to 0, and so on. So up to here it's real, and then the activation function from here, it will decide, okay, whether I should go to the binary 1 or 0. Okay, so this has some significance in the sense of finding the decision boundary and so on, and what this threshold does and so on. So basically we are learning a plain classifier here. Okay, so based on this, so if my threshold is if my threshold function is some fixed quantity t, then in that case this is the case. Okay, so I can think of, so this is the equation of the plane, right? So w1 x1 plus w2 x2, and so greater than t, I am on this pink region, and less than t, I am on this region. So basically equal to t is the plane that is deciding whether I should go to the 1 class or whether I should go to the 0 class, right? So basically what you have learned is a plane, and this plane is acting like a boundary on the one side, because a plane divides the space into 2 halves, right? So these are like hyperplane, right? So hyperplane is a plane in a higher dimension, right? So a plane in R2 is a line. In this case, that's what we can draw in a slide. But in a plane in a R3 will be R2. Will be a plane, 2-dimensional plane. Okay, so and it will divide the space into 2 parts. Okay, so you can generalize this idea. So it could be a plane in let us say hyperplane in higher dimension R3 will be w1 x1 plus w2 x2 plus w3 x3 will be equal to t. So this is basically I have a 3D region, and then I have a plane. Okay, and this plane is described by this, where these are the like the it can be taken as a normal. So w1, w2, w3 is the normal vector to this plane. So remember the vector, the normal definition of a plane, right? So so this is what is happening in the geometrically. So learning training a perceptron is like finding a plane. Okay, and this acts like a decision boundary to classify two objects in the 2-object case. If you want to do more, then you need to combine them, and then we will learn multiple planes. For example, in this case, if someone asks you to find out whether the point is inside this, now inside this pentagon, then you need to know multiple of the decision boundaries. For example, this is one, this is one, okay, this is one, and then this is one, and this is one, and this is one, and so on, right? So in this case, now it's natural that I know that one perceptron learns one plane. Okay, that's what I know. Now in this case, I need to know 5 boundaries. I need 5 perceptron, because each will help me to tell whether the point is here or here. That's the decision I have to make. Whether the point is here or here, that's another decision I need to make. Another decision I need to make, and so on. Okay, so hence in this case, I need 5. Okay, so this perceptron is learning this boundary, and let us say I added the second perceptron, and then this is learning this boundary, and then I added a third perceptron, fourth perceptron. I'm showing only 4, but there should be 5. Okay, and then this is the one, and so this way you can see I needed 5 perceptron to learn 5 different boundaries, and from this what do I need? So the thresholding should be based on if its point is inside, point is this way, this way, this way. So if I combine all of them, so let us say 1, 1, 1, each of this says okay, this is on the right side of on this side of the of my plane, then total should be 5, and then the thresholding could be based on that 5. And I say, okay, if the output is 5 from, so 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, and then if the output is 5, then I claim that the point is inside the pentagon, otherwise it's outside. So it's now very easy to make a neural network where we have this. So we have this perceptron, you can see, and each of them make their own decision. And then if the output is greater than or equal to 5, then we know for sure that the point is inside. If any of them missed, right, then the point must be outside. So, for example, the idea could be generalized. So the point could be either here or here. So now you have to apply the OR operation. So you will build a perceptron that learns this decision boundary. So in this case, you need the 5 perceptron and then one activation function to tell you whether the point was here, or because there is one more pentagon here. So you need yet another 5 perceptron to learn this decision boundary and then to make a decision here. Now out of these, you have to say point was here or here. So you will apply OR operation to tell. So either this was satisfied or this was satisfied, and then finally you can say, okay, the point was in either this or this. So from here you get the idea of how the neural networks could be used to even do more complicated tasks. For example, the point is inside the human body. The human body could be approximated by set of lines. Okay, approximated obviously because we cannot be exactly represented by lines only. So but closely approximated provided that you have enough of the small lines. So you can think of these as, so if for this figure you need to know how many perceptron you need, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So you get the idea, right? So those many perceptrons if you take, then you will be able to decide whether the point is inside or not, because all of them will give their verdict, and then based on that you can say, okay, the threshold can be based on the number of the lines we have, just like we did before. And it could be more complicated. For example, the point is inside the horse or so on. So these are just like simple sample examples of how things can be done. And then this could be extended to handwritten digit recognition and so on. Okay, so from this basic idea, what do we learn? What do we learn is that we started with the black box, that what is there inside, that Google and Alexa and all this can get the voice signal, and then it can understand what we are trying to say. Okay, or sometimes we give an image, for example, in Facebook, and then it generates some kind of automated text caption for us. So this so behind all this is this MLP, multi-layer perceptron, or what we are going to see is deep neural networks, right? So we replace all these black boxes by neural networks, and this goes in on same lines that human beings perhaps are also mind is also based on neural networks, and hence that's the reason why we can understand the voices, and we can also understand what is happening in the image, or we can play a game. So more concrete things could be given. For instance, the activation function that I kept talking about, there could be of many types. Okay, so there could be like sigmoid, there could be tanh, there could be rectified linear units, there could be the simple Boolean thresholding. So you have many choices to decide on the activation function. Okay, so that's like the new things, new or like the extensions of how you can build variety of neural networks based on different type of activation functions. Okay, and as I said, you can have many of these perceptron, or loosely speaking neurons, and you can have multiple layers. So this will be first layer, second layer, and so on. So now from here, this template, we can extend this and make a variety of networks. So some of the sample networks are like artificial neural networks, is called ANN, and then CNN is convolutional neural networks. So this mostly goes for images. And then we have RNN, recurrent neural networks. This mostly to learn a pattern in the sequences. For example, in languages you can think of as sequence of words. Okay, and same along the same lines you have LSTM, and then you can have more recent ones like attention-based models, and then you can have if you want to see some generative models, then you can consider GAN, but GANs are usually based on the basically in GAN we have like two neural networks you can think of. So one is discriminator and generator, and then but basically there may be some CNNs. So so these are the different types of neural networks. We want to get a glimpse into this. I don't know how much time I have, and this is the reason why I'm going a little bit faster. Okay, so so the perceptron, the basic idea is now clear. So the input comes, we take a linear combination, we do an activation and so on. Yeah, so I can, so we can give some notations to these, right? So we can give notations to the weights. For example, you need to know like what this weight could be, right? So I can give, so let us say weight coming from 1 to the let us say the how many 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 eighth. So I can denote this as 1/8. Okay, so these are some notations that I'm trying to describe here. So this is like 1/7, the weight 1/7. So we need proper notations to also denote these weights, because remember each of these have the weights, right? These are fully connected, and each of these has weights. Each of these has weights, and these weights are the ones that we are supposed to learn. So overall, this is an optimization problem, and given a label data, we build a loss functions because the labels are known to us. So for the given data, we know what is the expected output and what is our model going to predict, which is the f here. So f is the prediction function here, and then we build a loss function, and then we want to minimize the loss function over the weights. So essentially, we are tuning the weights so that the loss becomes minimized. Okay, and to do this, we need a lot of maths. Essentially we need, so this is an optimization problem. Okay, so this is optimization problem. So this is why if you want to do machine learning, then if you really want to understand a lot of detail, then you need to also understand a lot of maths, because it requires optimization methods and so on. But if you don't want to go into a lot more detail, then you can just use some existing libraries, and then you can train your model. Okay, so the training part of machine learning is solving an optimization problem, basically minimizing the loss function over the weights. And to minimize, we use something called gradient descent. Okay, so gradient descent idea is very simple. Basically, there is a fundamental result from, let us say, calculus. The calculus says that if you have a function, if you compute the gradient points in the direction of the increase of the function. So this says, okay, if you go in this direction, so basically on my domain, if I go in this direction, then the function is increasing. So that's the basic fact of the of calculus. Okay, so gradients points in direction of increase of the function. So this tells me, because my goal is to decrease, right? So if this way it's increasing, then obviously I will go negative direction, then to hope that I will decrease. So that's the main idea of the gradient descent method. To minimize a function, you follow the negative gradient direction, right? So now to get the new weight wi, I will do the current, let us say wi plus 1, the new point, this is my wi, and I want to get to wi plus 1. Then from vector calculus, we know that to go in a certain direction, right? So I want to follow the direction of the negative gradient to decrease. So my current point minus, okay, so because I have to go to the negative gradient, minus gradient of L computed at wi. Okay, so computed at wi, and that's the gradient descent method. Okay, so your current weight minus the gradient of your loss at the current weight, and that tells you that you have reached here. So now you are here, and you repeat the process again. Okay, so again you compute the gradient here. So gradient again will point in this direction, but to decrease you have to go in this direction. So again you will you will compute now wi plus 2 is wi plus 1 minus the gradient of L computed at wi plus 1. So this is the simple gradient method. There are some minor details here, that how far you want to go in the direction. You know to go in certain direction, but how far you want to go in the direction, that you don't know in advance. So you will put some parameter, hyperparameter alpha, and this is called the step length. And this is usually not known. So you can choose some heuristic 0.1, 0.001, something like that, and to know how far you want to go in that direction. Okay, so I have told you in a very basic idea of how the optimization method is used to minimize a loss function and hence do the training of a neural network. Okay, so there are, so this is the gradient descent that I told you. Okay, maybe the notation is slightly different. So this is like the loss function I'm talking about. And this is the step length epsilon I was talking about. And this is the gradient. So at current position, I go in the direction of negative gradient. So this is the negative here, negative gradient with a step length of alpha. So there are certain heuristics of how should I choose the step length. So there are many heuristic, okay, and there is no like a clear cut rule. So these are mostly heuristics. Like these are okay for specific problems sometimes. So I know I won't go into detail of these things. Okay, so for example, if you see in this figure, the minima is here, the star, and you started from some initial guess. Let us say this is your W0, and then at some point you got W1, W2, and so on. You arrive at final, let us say W star. And where I mean, you are going towards that. And then let us say the minima of my loss function is here. Okay, and these are so-called level curves of the function. So it's just these are just like 2D representation of the function. For example, if I tell you if I give you the loss function is like this. So let us say my loss function is like this. Then the level curves of this is the function. So I will take a curve like this, and then I will project it down. So they will look like this in the domain. So here this power portion will look like this, and this person will look like this. So minima of this function is here, right? So minima of this function is here, and corresponding on the 2D. So it's just a way to convenient level curve, right? So level curve. So this is a convenient way to see your function in a 2D plane. Okay, the 3D function in 2D plane. So basically, I know minima is here, so center will be inside on the concentric circle. So here also, same way you can think of this as functions seen on 2D plane, and then the minima is where I want to go, and then I'm going it like this. Okay, so this is what the training is happening here. Okay, so training could be complicated. Sometimes you may get lost. Okay, if you don't follow, because gradient method tells you only local information, so you don't know in principle whether you're going to local minima or global minimum, because in some cases it may for example, yeah, so I mean in this case also there is no problem, because it seems that I'm still approaching to the global minima, because I started with a different point. In this figure I'm showing you a different starting point, and then it seems like I'm approaching there. There are some concepts of adding momentum. I can tell you a very basic idea of momentum. What happens is that we are using stochastic gradient descent. In a stochastic gradient descent, if I go back, and if you see, this is stochastic gradient descent in the sense that I am doing gradient only over a small number of samples, not the full number of samples. And that's why it's called stochastic, because the batches even that I am picking, remember that my X data is there, right? So X1, X2, Xn. So these are the sample data is given, and then I'm given also the labels for this Y1, Y2, Yn. You can think of this as X1 is a vector representation of an image, and then I'm told whether it's cat or not. So Y1 could be 1 or 0. Similarly, I'm given another picture of some other image, and then I'm told whether there is a cat or not, or so on, right? So but the problem is that for large scale data, you won't be able to like take all of them in your loss function. So you can pick some of them. So let us say I pick this as one of them, this as one of them, and this is one of them. So let us say I choose M of them in my batch, and that's called the batch. Okay, so one batch with M examples you choose randomly. Let us say usually it's chosen randomly, and then you create a loss function only for this. So you create loss only for this, and you pick the other ones in the next step of the next iteration. Then you pick the remaining ones. I mean the remaining, again, small batch. So you can divide your problem into several batches and create a loss out of those batches only. It's going only up to M and not considering all of N. So hence it's stochastic, because the batches you are taking are random, and the loss function is not the full loss function but only on some small batch. And that's why it's called stochastic gradient descent. So the problem with stochastic gradient descent is it can oscillate because of this randomness. It can lead to a little bit of oscillations like you see here, and to minimize and you may get slower. That's the point. So what you can do is that you can keep an average of this. So this direction you have to go, this direction you have to go, this direction you have to go. So overall, if you have taken the average of this, so let us say, remember the vector calculus, right? So if this is the direction, and if this is the direction, then the average would be sum of this, which will lead me to this, right? So if I had taken a note of this gradient G1 and G2, if I have taken an average of this, then I would not have oscillated much. So what it says is that you keep a previous you keep a running average. You keep a running average of this these gradients. So this is the running average of the gradients, average of gradients. And if you keep a running average of the gradients, then the way you will go will be more smooth. So you're going more like this. So you will tend to oscillate a little bit less. So yeah. Yeah, so I can also do vector activation, but let me, yeah. So now I can go to deep neural networks. So deep neural networks is basically, these are the notations here. So we have now multiple layers. So basically that's the meaning of deep here. So, and then we can have multiple perceptrons in each layer, and we can define some notations. Okay, so these are the matrices of the weights, and this is the matrix of the weights of the between the second and the third layer, and so on. So input layer is called the 0th layer, and denote the output of the ith perceptron as yik. So these are the outputs of the perceptrons after each layer, and so on. Yeah, so so this is called input layer, and then yeah, it could be like a set of pixel values, speech features, or it could be text or so on. So we can think of many examples. And then these ones are called hidden layer, and then this is called the output layer. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so this is the output layer I told. So it depends on what could be the output we are seeking for. So if it's a multi-class classifier, then we will get multiple outputs. Okay. So for example, we have we have in our data cat, horse, and dog, and so on. So this is a multi-class classification problem because I want to classify 3 things. So this the first one could be corresponding for cat, second one could be for horse, so cat, horse, and the third one could be for dog. And then my output could be, let us say, 0.9, and then this is 0.1, 0.1. Then I can say, okay, it's 0.9, and then it must be cat. Okay, so the multi-class classifier needs output as a vector. Okay, so with length n. So these are the multi-class classifiers. So we can think of this as multi-class classification problem as, let us say, the handwritten digit, right? So okay, so we can define the loss functions like I told you before. The one simple loss function would be the output and the level that are given to me, and the desired I mean the levels that I produce, and then the desired output, and then take a difference of that. So there are many ways to define a loss functions. Okay, and remember to minimize the loss function, we need to compute the gradient, right? So hence we need the concept of gradients. So if you choose loss functions like this, the gradient of this should be like so if I take a derivative of this with respect to y, then this is what derivative I will get. Okay, so I can skip this for the moment. Yeah. So what is a forward pass in a neural? So forward pass is when you have a data, and then the data goes through the network. We take a linear combination, you get the output Z1, then it goes through the activation function. So here I've chosen all the activation functions to be same. Usually it's the case. And then after activation, I get the output I1, and then I get the pre-activation values, which is Z2, because it is again a linear combination of now Y1 values. And then I need to do activation with F2. So F2 could be different from F1. And then I get output Y2. If I do linear combination, I get Z3. Z3, I do activations, and so on. So these are the steps that we need to do. So we take a linear combination. Let us say Yi0 is the input. So I denote 0 as the input vector. And then I can take a linear combination of that, and then I did a activation of that, and then I did a linear combination of now the previous output, which is Y1. And then I take a linear combination, so I get Z2. Z2 is passed through F2, and then I get the activated values, and then I do a linear combination of Y2, and then I activate that and Z3. So this way you can see that it goes through linear combination, activation, and so on. So that process continues. So that's the forward pass. Okay. So forward pass. If you do throughout, and at the end what you get is Yn is Fn Zn. So that's the final output that you get. So all this can be written in an algorithm form in a loop, because these are like same process being repeated. So I can write a Z as the linear combination of the Y at the kth level, and then the activation of those values. So all this can be iterated from k equal to 1 to n, where n is the depth of your network, and the number of layers on your network. So it can be written in a very small form. compact form. So this is the algorithm for forward pass. Okay, and now remember that to compute gradients, we need to do the to do gradient descent. We need to compute the the gradients, right? So the gradient. So here we will need some calculus results. We need to do. We need to compute. We will compute gradient using a chain rule, because if you see, this is going like a chain. Okay, so we will use that fact. So you will take derivative yn with zn with w. Because these are the weights. Eventually what we need is the gradient of the loss with respect to the weights, but these weights are scattered around. So there are weights here, there are weights here, there are weights here, there are weights here. So, but we will go there in a step-by-step manner. Okay, and that's the meaning of a back prop here. So forward pass means you go like this, and backward is to compute the gradient. So we can do this gradient computation, as I said, in a chain way. Okay, so one after the other and so on. So I'm not going into too much detail of this right now. Basically, I will stop. I will stop with back propagation by saying that it's an application of chain rule by computing the dependencies one after the other. and remember, the goal is to compute the gradient with respect to the weights. So these things can be computed. For example, here, if you can see, I could compute the weight of the network with respect to W1. And to do that, I need the loss. So this div here stands for the loss. So first I did a loss with respect to Zn. So loss function with respect to Zn, and then Zn with respect to W. Okay, so that's the chain rule I used here. And I do this for all the weights. Right, so it's just a recursive way of doing things, and once this is done, okay, and then I move on, and then I compute weights of, let us say, here. So I compute weights of n-1 now. Okay, so again I do it in the same way. Loss of this with respect to Zn, and Zn with respect to the weights will be yi. Okay, so this way I can compute the loss, and this is the algorithm for back propagation. Okay, by using the chain rule. Okay, so I can skip the case for vector case. Yeah, this is just extension of the vectorization of what we are trying to do. Okay, so now I will move to something called RNN. It's called recurrent neural networks. Recurrent neural networks. So why do we need this? So we saw ANN, artificial neural networks. Now we see RNN. So remember that, just assume that you have a batchmate, and then you have a shared kitchen, okay? And assume that your roommate cooks very well. So let us say the roommate cooks 3 things, like apple pie, burger, or a chicken, let us say. So, but he has a rule, he cooks depending on the weather, okay? So your batchmate cooks depending on the weather. So this is the rule, like, you want to find out, right? So let us say you have a batchmate, you are sharing a room, and your batchmate cooks certain things, but he follows certain rule. Now your job is to identify that rule. So for instance, if it is sunny, he cooks apple pie. If it is rainy, he cooks burger, and so on. Okay, so what we want to do is to build a prediction function that can predict what he's trying to do. So we can encode our problem into vector form. So let us say apple pie, I give this into vector form. Burger, I give this vector form, and sunny and rainy weather, I can also give a vector form. So this is the modeling going on here. Now I want to build a network or the prediction function that if it is sunny, then it can predict that the output will be apple pie, and if it is rainy, then it will predict that the output will be burger. So this is our job to find out this. So recall the vector encoding. So this is the vector encoding we have, and what we really want is 0, 1 outputs apple pie, and 1, 0 outputs apple pie, and 0, 1 outputs the vector of burger. So what could be the case in this case? Well, in this case, it's a matrix. Which one, right? So here I came up with this matrix, and then I told you that if my prediction function is nothing but a matrix in this case. So for example, 1, 0 comes in. If I multiply with this matrix, then it gives me the vector representation of apple pie. And so for rainy day, again, for rainy day, I pass it here. So 0, 1 goes in, and it gives me a vector representations of burger. Okay, so in this case, I came up with a nice matrix after doing some handcrafting. But I can represent this also as a neural network, and you can see that the matrix entries could be arranged in a way that I have this, right? So 1 to 1, the weight is 1, and 1 to 2, the weight is 0, and so on. So basically, if you see 1 here, then what are the weights associated with this 1 going out from 1? So 1, 0, 0, right? So that's the column of the first. Okay, so 1, 0, 0. And similarly, if you look at this, what are the weights going out of this? It's like 0, 1, 0, right? So 0, 1, 0. So that's how I predicted that's how I created the corresponding neural network out of matrix. So essentially, the whole thing is like this. So now if you give me 1, 0 input, so 1, 0 will be the sunny. And then if you see that if you apply the corresponding weights, basically the sum of the weights, in this case, there is no activation going on. You just take the sum of the weights, and while the output would be 1, 0, 0, but 1, 0, 0 is nothing but the apple pie that I wanted. And you can play with the other case. For example, you can put the encoding of 0, 1, which is the rainy day, and you will see that the output will be the vector encoding of the burger. So from here, we are getting an intuition of what is happening here. So, but assume that the problem can be like more generalized. Let us say the rule is slightly more complicated. So for example, on Monday he cooks apple pie, Tuesday he cooks burger, Wednesday he cooks chicken, and Thursday he cooks apple pie. So now in this case also I can come up with a matrix that can do the prediction. And this is the network that it looks like. Yeah. So once again, so yeah, so what he's trying to do is that he's trying to cook things in a sequence, right? So it's kind of a sequence problem, right? So I mean, compared to the previous case, what he's trying to do is if he has cooked apple pie, then what he will cook next it will be burger. What he will cook next will be chicken. What he will cook next will be apple pie, and so on. And this will form a cycle. So this is kind of a sequence. Okay. So in this case, again, so this is the point where the recurrence is happening, right? So if it was apple pie, then it depends on what it has seen before. So if it was apple pie, then it is going to cook a burger. Okay. If it was chicken, then it's going to cook apple pie. So in a sequence problem, it depends on what was the output before. So hence the output of the current one should be fed as an input to determine the next output. So that's why that's why it's called a recurrent, because of this, because the output is fed back in as an input. So things can be more complicated. For example, it's not just the sequence, but it also depends on the weather. For example, so if it is sunny, and if he has cooked apple pie on Monday, then he will cook apple pie. Okay. If it is rainy, and if he has cooked apple pie on Tuesday, then he is going to cook burger. Okay, so there is a sequence, but there are now conditions here. So in this case, you want to understand and understand rules, right? So, and hence things can get really complicated. Now you can you can see these as these are the difficulties that you face when you're trying to, let us say, do a language translation. Let us say from English to French, if you want to do, then these are the difficulties you will see, because there will be a lot of if and else conditions, right? So for example, if it is this word and if you have seen something else also before that word, then this is the prediction of the next word. Okay, or the sentence, or so on. So these are the difficulties we are trying to model with this small example, that although we can have a sequence problem just like a language, but then the difficulty arises from a lot of conditions we have. So how will you build a prediction function in these cases? Okay, so your roommate has this inner hidden rules, just like languages can have many of these rules. But how do you build a network that the computer can train and learn, right? So in this case, I can again come up with some well-crafted set of rules, and that will do the prediction for me. Okay, so So in this case, I propose that propose two types of matrices, like for example, food matrix and then the weather matrix. So this is my plan. So I will take a food matrix, weather matrix, I combine them, and then if I merge in some way, then I will get the corresponding output. Okay. So this is how I'm trying to model this problem here. So if you see this example here, then for the food matrix, if you see the food matrix, then let us say if the apple pie comes in, what it does is that it produces the same output because this is the identity matrix, and it produces the output for the next day, which is the apple pie in this case. Okay, and the way the weather and similarly, for example, if it's the burger, then the output, one of the output is burger and the other one is for the chicken. And Xn of the weather matrix we can think of. So this is an input, this is sunny, then the one of the output is the same, and the other one is the prediction for the next day. Okay, so this way I have created a template functions that can do some of the operations, and then my overall idea is that I will combine food and weather matrix, and then I will do some kind of merging, because overall what I feel is that it's not just the food that is cooked before, but it's also the weather, and together they should be combined in some form to do the next prediction. Okay, so the idea here is the following: that the first thing is that the input passes through the food matrix, and the food matrix when it passes through, you do a one-hot encoding. Okay, so some kind of a nonlinear operation you do. For example, in this case, you did some nonlinear operation, and it created a one-hot encoding of this. So basically, the largest value of this is kept 1, and all other are made 0. That's one-hot encoding. And then after that, you added these values, and then you get the output. So all this has been handcrafted. It may have taken me a lot of time to think about this, but this is the handcrafted thing I'm trying to like to understand the rule. So overall, it can be seen as a neural network. So for example, we have a food matrix, you have a weather matrix, and together they go. Okay, so this produces some output and this produces some output, and then I do some kind of a nonlinear operation. I do a merging and so on. So let us see an example on this. So let us say I have an apple pie, it goes here, and then it produces some output, okay, and then I do a nonlinear operation. In this case, yeah, so let me, so in this case, yeah, so what do we do here? In this case, we added basically the first, these two vectors we added, and once we added, we get this. And then after that, I do the nonlinear, the max thing.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, as your been discussion, different types of neural network architectures. Now I got small doubt, sir.
Yes.
This RNN is especially you are used for prediction. How we can justify this RNN can be only used for prediction? Can be only for prediction. Can you give me some clarity, sir, please? Why? Because I can use normal neural network for prediction also.
No, for the problem with the sequence type problem is that we the current output is needed for the next output. So it's for a sequence problem. So for example, I am going to learn. So if you see this, these are the sequence. So and you may want to predict the next thing as a set of words, let us say, right? So this is a sequence problem. So what happened here and here, it decides what I might want to predict as a next step. So this type of problem is a bit different. This is a sequence problem, sequence prediction problem, compared to the other type, that artificial neural network that we have. So one image came, and then I had to predict whether there is a cat or not. So that's one type of problem. There is no sequence involved, just one image came, and then I said whether it's cat or not, that's it. In this type of problem, a sequence of input is coming. So let us say sequence is set of words. So sequence of input is coming, just like your roommate is preparing food every day in a sequence, okay? And so they are not independent. It's not like he's creating something randomly and then one day. It's a pattern you have to learn in a sequence, of pattern. And then it also depends on the weather data. It also depends on the weather data. And then based on this, he has to predict what you are supposed to predict what he's going to do next. So the difference I would say is on the neural networks, different type of neural networks based on the problem that we want to solve. If you want to solve problems where just want to do classification, then artificial neural networks, or if it is image, then usually we use CNN. And if you want to solve sequence type problem, then you have to do RNN. It's a recurrent neural network because the output that I have is going to influence this, and this current output is going to influence the next output and so on. So that's why it's called recurrent. So this way you can, if you continue with this example, then I can define some let us say the one hot encoding of this I did to the max, and then after this I merge this. So this looks handcrafted, but this works, okay? And why the problem, why it is called recurrent neural network? It's recurrent neural network because the output that I got today, let us say, which is apple pie, because this output is going to decide how your roommate is going to cook the next food, right? So if he has cooked apple pie, then it's going to decide now what he is going to cook next. So this should also be fed. This should be fed as an input now. Okay, so this is why this arrow goes in. So whatever output that today he cooked, for the next day prediction, you have to take the current day output and then feed in the apple pie, and then you have to feed in the weather data. And based on this, now your model will predict what he's going to cook next. So this is why it's recurrent, because the current output is going back and being fed as an input. So in this very hand-cook example, I could predict. Okay, so you can see this example later on. I could do a prediction, but in general, remember that that these are the weights of the neural network, right? The matrices are the weights of the neural network. I could have chosen some arbitrary weights to start with. Okay, so this will become a weight of my neural network, and then I will learn the weights of the network. The only problem is that there are some operations involved, and I have to compute the gradient of this function over different additions and then one hot encoding and so on. But provided that I can, so this is some neural network with the weights A, B, C, D, P, Q, R, Y, Z, capital A, C, D, and so on. So you combine all the weights. This is the weights of a neural network, and the actual data output because you see every day how your roommate is cooking. So the output, actual output So you take a difference of that, some difference, and then you minimize this over this these weights. And that's when you're training your network, and then you say, okay, after I minimize this, because here, if you see, I have hand cooked this because this was a simple problem. So I came up with this handcrafted weights, but in general, it's not possible to do that. So you will put arbitrary weights and you let the gradient descent work by minimizing this loss function. And then when the loss function is minimal, then you will see that the weights you learn will be very similar to this, not exactly like this. It could be like 0.99 or something like that, which is close to 1. Okay. But that's the way we can automate things. Okay, so using the supervised learning. So basically, you see every day what he's doing, and you can start with some template, and then you can minimize you can tune the weights of your model. So RNN can be used, for example, to write codes. Okay, but it is not perfect. I would say it's like syntactically correct, but it's still a work in progress. So can you do coding for us, right? So we can say that, okay, write the code for the Fibonacci, generating the Fibonacci sequence, and it should generate the code for us. Or it's not just memorizing. I must say it's about learning, right? So I will do some variation, right? So I can say, okay, write code for factorial of x, but then later I would say, okay, I want factorial of x plus y, or I mean something like that. Like I will just change the question slightly, and it should be able to generate it. That would be the way humans also do, right? So we can generate new things. So that's the thing in progress right now. But yeah. So it can generate quotes, it can write stories like text. For example, if you see this text, this is a new text. Okay, this is not memorized or copied from somewhere. Okay, so this is a new text generated by RNN. Okay, then if you see it writes grammatically correct sentences. Okay, so one of the many sages of the time, the Bodhisattva was a popular religious figure in India and around the world and so on. So you see that it makes sense. So basically it learns the grammar, which word should come where and so on. So RNN now can do write text, which is new. Okay. It can do speech recognition. Okay, so it can do speech recognition. Speech could also be seen as a sequence type problem, right? So for example, I am teaching deep learning. Okay, so I could correspond to some spectral data. Okay, so the whatever speech we do, you remember, it could be seen as a signal, and then those signals can be represented as a vector. Okay, so from here to here, you can see that there is a hot area. So it's some word is spoken here. Maybe there is a pause here, and then there is some word spoken here. There is some word spoken here. So that way, it is also a sequence problem where each word corresponds to these spectral vectors. So this is also a sequence problem, and again RNN could be used here. And again, there is a dependency from one sequence to another to predict what it's to be predicted as a next step. So we can build a neural network based on this sequence data. Okay, so again, speech recognition could be done. So there is like a nice way to introduce. What I have told you just now is a intuition behind RNN, like how the method works and so on. But there is a deep I mean, one can formally define this in a concrete sense. So I believe I may not have much time. So overall, you can think of recurrent neural networks like this. Okay, so I mean, this is the beginnings of this. So I have some historical context in my slides, but let me go to the basic idea of RNN, the modern day RNN. Yeah, so you can think of this as like this. So for example, some input data is there. So let us say at time t equal to 0, it goes in. Okay, and some initial state vector could be there. And then these are neural networks, the usual neural network, perceptrons or multilayer perceptrons. Some processing happens, and then the current output is there. And then similarly, I have another input. In the sequence, processing happens, and the current output is there, and some information is passing from the previous step. Okay, or I could have explicitly passed this output also. Okay, or I could pass some hidden representation and then just pass it on to the next. I can also pass it on to the next, and so on. So these are, or I could use some additional skip connection, so-called. So I can pass output from here to here and here. I can also pass output from here to here and here. I could have multiple memory units that can be taken from the previous times and so on. So they are, like, as I said, things can get really complicated. So I can have many different types of connections and so on. More complicated network could be there and so on. So these are just variety of networks, RNN network. But the basic idea I told you is at time t, some sequence goes in, it gets processed, some correct output is there, and during the processing, some state variables are there that I will pass it on to the next processing step. So then at time t0, some second input comes, and then it processed and so on. So this way, I generate a sequence of outputs, and then I also carry over some memory that helps me in the prediction of the next output. So this can be formally like written down. I am not going to like go into too much detail of this. So but the idea, if you see, it's again similar. It's a linear combination of the input weights. Okay, and then there is something also coming from the right hand side, right? So this is my H data, which also has the weights. So this is coming from this way is coming this way. It's like I'm also learning what, I mean, it was it significant to take memory from the previous time. This is also I'm learning. That's why I put a weight here. So things are like this. So now current sequence comes in, there is a weight here. And and then I'm learning the weights and then activations and so on. And then I'm also taking data from the hidden representations from the previous layer. And then I'm also putting a weight. And so I'm trying to see what is important, right? So the sequence input is coming in, the previous information is coming in, all this combined should give me the output that I'm expecting and so on. So all this could be formally represented, right? So, and then this is the final layer, YT. So this was the HT and this is the YT. So final layer, you just do some activation, okay? And then of course you do the linear combination of the output that you are getting, which is H1. So there are weights here also. So this way you can see it's a neural network, but extension to the sequence case. So now for a more complicated network, you can see I can write it in the mathematical form. So the input X goes in, I take a linear combination with the weights here, and then I take the memory variables which are coming from here. Okay, and then so in this case, I'm just taking one H1 here. So once I am processed this, okay, and then I will pass on here. I will take the linear combination of this guy, linear combination of this guy, and so on. So it just looks the notations look a little bit complicated, but the idea is simple. So there could be like many types of RNN. So the one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, depending on the problems we want to have. Okay, so for example, sequence generation, or if we want to, for example, if we want to do speech recognition, or we want to do text classification, or so on. So variety of things, depending on the problem at hand, we can do really a lot of different variants. So the network looks like this overall, and then now you have the weights here, right? So weights. So all these weights, and you have to train this. Okay, so you can build a loss function, which is the loss function this, and you know what was the actual output, and you get the predicted output from your template network, and based on this you can define a loss function, and then you need to compute the gradient. So I'm not going into detail of these things. So to compute the gradient, you have to use the chain rule, just like in a neural network. You have to do chain rule. You have to do backprop and so on. So it's a little bit like simple, but just one has to be a little bit careful in how you are going here to here, here to here. It's a calculus thing. So I don't have much time to discuss these things, but so this is just a it's called backward propagation in time. Okay, so it's BPTT, so backward propagation in time. So that is used for RNN. So basically that's how. So and we can talk about bidirectional RNN. So not just this way, we can also go in this way. Then it's called bidirectional. So you stack one more layer. And then, so basically, let us say you want to do translation, then maybe you may say that if I go in a reverse direction also, then it's also useful if I see the sentence in a reverse way, and if I see the sentence in the forward way. So people have tried this bidirectional RNN and so on. So this is the example of a bidirectional RNN. So it's helpful, especially in the translation case. So so these are the summary of RNN, and yeah. For example, addition of 2 bits, right? So if I want to add this sequence and this sequence, then in these cases, MLP won't be a good idea. You should better use RNN, because these are more like a sequence, because 1 plus 1 have a carryover, right? So that's why it's better to do in a sequence by sequence way, so that you can add carryover. So there is a concept of memory that you take, and then so on. So there are problems like this where RNN is more useful. So there are many applications, like it can write LaTeX paper. If you are familiar with LaTeX, then it can generate LaTeX paper, the LaTeX that compiles, and so on. I believe I don't have time. I must stop at, yeah, I'm already 5 minutes more. So I think I have to stop here. I think CNN was left, so I could cover only 2, ANN and RNN. I didn't have time for CNN. Okay, so with this I will stop.
Sir, hello, sir.
Hello, yes.
Pawan, sir.
Yes.
Fantastic lecture you are giving today. Actually, I got the PhD in 2014, sir.
Yes.
With MLP. Same thing I revised once again, and but I am not having idea on RNN. Okay, now I got the full idea on RNN, sir. And,
okay, it's my pleasure. Yeah, thanks.
Sir. Yeah. That's you were given enough information for us, and then if you would do complete CNN, it may be better for us. But due to our time constraints, it may be stopped. Sir,
Yes.
Can you share this PPT to us?
Yes, I will share this, and CNN is also explained with some simple examples, and this will help you a lot. Yeah, so I will share the full thing. The slides are like very long, 750 slides or something. Usually it requires 3 hours to cover everything, but
sir.
somehow I managed with a little bit of, yeah. But CNN, yeah, is the last part that I could not cover. So you can see the slides on your own, and you will understand on your own. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Fine, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Sir, on behalf of the Atal FTP organizing team, we all thank you for joining with us and delivering a wonderful session on various concepts of the machine learning, deep learning, all these concepts. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your informative session to all the participants.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks for inviting, and thanks a lot. I hope you have got something from this.
Yes, sir. Definitely.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We will
Thanks.
be in touch with you, sir, for further.
Okay, thanks.